Hi there everyone, welcome back to Dandelion Delphi Tutorials. Today we're going to practice by doing a past paper, final of 2015, question 3. It contains two-dimensional arrays, so this would be more applicable to grade 12 learners. This will form part of your last question in your final exams, as now the papers have 4 questions and this will be part of question 4. But any past paper, the last question, question 3 or 4, would be good for you to practice 2D arrays with. Make sure that you download the paper and practice it as you watch the video from education.gov.za. You will see that the GUI they provided you had space here for you to add components for the output error as well as some additional components. All I needed was 3 buttons to add here. But what I want you to do is I want you to add a rich edit to the output area, as that is more complicated to display in than our string grid, so it would be good practice for you, and my video is going to show you how to display using a rich edit here. It was the only paper that allowed us to pick the component to display in, so I wouldn't expect this in the future. They have provided you with an array called Array Workshops that contains these names of the different workshops. And parallel to that, you then have a two-dimensional array bookings that holds the number of people for that workshop. This was the first button that I added to display the bookings. And I have used a display procedure because the other questions also needed to display your two-dimensional array. Press pause and try it yourself. This is my display procedure, and here I am. The top part is just showing you how to create those headings. So I have cleared the rich edit so that every time that I call the display procedure, it will display the updated information. I then need to set some tab stops because I was asked to display it in neat columns. And I am going to set S out, which is my output string here, to workshop with a #9 to provide me with a tab space. Always take note of the values that are given, or the declarations. Here I have some constants that I could use for the number of rows and columns, and that was declared for me as well as these arrays, and then also a variable number of workshops that was initially set to 6, as later on in the program we're going to delete from that, and then I need to use number of workshops to ensure that I display the correct values. To know how many tab stops you need to create, you can just look at the screenshot to say there's 1, 2, 3, 4. It's usually 1 less than the number of columns that you have. So therefore my tab count is 4, and you will see that my first tab 0, is the smallest one, and the last one would be the largest one. I have initialized S out with workshop and the tab space, and now I can loop using 1 to max col, that's the number of columns that you have, to display day 1, 2, and 3, and 4, instead of having to write all of that in my rich edit. However, you would score the same marks. This is maybe just a little bit quicker to code. Once I have built the whole string, S out, my output string, I can then display it, and I could see that there was an open line between the headings and the rest of the output. At the bottom here, I am displaying the data from my arrays. And remember, when we want to display two-dimensional arrays in a rich edit, it's a row question since we are displaying row by row. So I'm starting with a for loop for the row from 1 to the number of workshops. This is the value that will change later on when we delete a workshop. And then I'm going to start my output string with a parallel one-dimensional array workshop, which will now contain the name of that workshop and a #9. I will then loop through all my columns, building my output string and adding to that my two-dimensional array bookings, I row and I column. Remember, array bookings is an integer data type, so therefore I would have to interstring it, and remember your #9s at the end. Just before I loop to the next row, I will then display S out, and when my loop executes again, the second workshop will be added to S out. I called my display procedure here in form on activate, as they didn't indicate exactly when and where you had to display it, but a button would have been fine as well. I added another button for this part of the question. The workshops can accommodate a maximum of 20 bookings. The user is going to select which workshop and the day that they would like to attend the workshop, and you have to determine whether it is fully booked or not. If it's not fully booked, you need to update your 2D array. Press pause and try this yourself. I'll soon scroll down and show you the examples of output. Here's an example of aerobics on day 2. Make sure that you don't only display this message, but that this value is updated. And if they selected cardio workshop on day 4, it should display a message saying it's fully booked. The row of my 2D array is the workshop that they selected from the combo box topic. And the combo box, the first item would be item index number 0. For that reason, I added a +1. So now I can use iRow in my 2D array that starts at 1. Same for my array workshops. Will now have the correct value stored there in iRow to display that specific workshop. For the same reason, for the column, the item index of the first day would be 0. So I've just added 1, and now I have the column stored in iCol. No loop was needed here because iRow and iColumn now hold the indexes in the 2-dimensional array of the one that I need to see if there is still space. So I'm using my if statement to test if that number of bookings is still less than 20. If it is, I can inc that value. It's an integer, so you can use array bookings, iRow and iCol in an inc, or you could say array bookings is assigned to array bookings +1 using the correct indexes. I have now called my display procedure to display the updated information of those bookings that have changed. I also need to display the name of the workshop, and iRow is now corresponding with the workshop they selected from the combo box, and also the day number which is stored in iCol. If the bookings were 20 or more, my else statement will be executed, and I will still display the workshop number or the workshop name using iRow on the day of iColumn, but saying that it is fully booked. For this button that I've added to the form, we have to determine the number of free bottles of water we need to buy per day. Remember in the videos of the 2D arrays that I explained to you, we have to interpret the question to know whether we should start with a for loop for the row or the column. Now, since this question is asking us for the water for each day, and the days are stored in the columns, you'll have to start with your for loop for the columns. You also then need to display the day number and the number of bottled water that you need for that day. But then you also need to calculate how many full cases of bottled water they need to purchase. Now that is adding up all of these values, but very important is that a full case contains 24 bottles of water, and you can't buy half, and you don't want to buy too few, so make sure that you get the right output. Press pause and try this yourself. I'll soon show you the rest of the output. Here you can see the number of bottled water needed, and let's have a look at the memo. This question is combining getting a total overall as well as the total per day. But remember, the days are stored in the column, so I'm starting with my for loop for the column using that constant they gave me, so looping from 1 to max col. To calculate the total per day, I need to initialize iday on the inside of this for loop. Then only do I loop through the rows from 1 to the number of workshops and adding the number of guests there to iday using array bookings, my 2-dimensional array. Then I need to display, after calculating how many bottles of water I need for each day, I'm going to display iday, for example, 1, and then that variable iday. Next time I'm looping for day 2, the day variable will be set back to 0, and I'll be calculating the total for day 2. Important also is to add to your total the number of bottles needed overall. So I have just used iday here, that would be calculating per day and adding that day to my running total. Remember also the variables used on both sides of the assignment statement and therefore need to be initialized above the loop. Now they asked us to calculate how many full cases of water we needed, but we didn't want to buy too few, and for that reason I'm using CEAL. So I'm going to take the total and divide it by 24. If it gives me 1.1 cases, it will CEAL that answer, which means I will have to buy 2 cases. I've just used iday again there because I'm really done with iday. You could have used a different variable if you wanted to. Remember that to use CEAL, we have to add math to the uses of our unit right at the top. Below the output per day, there was an open line, then a labeled total, and we're displaying the total here, and then the number of full cases needed, and that variable that I've calculated using my CEAL. So this last button that I added to the form was to cancel a workshop. And we've done this before in the 2D array videos. I am cancelling a workshop, and a workshop is stored in a row. Therefore, my for loop will start with a row, and we'll start our for loop at the position that we want to delete. And then we will proceed to place the next value over that value, keeping my columns the same, but moving my rows. Take note that the example of output is with your original data supplied, so before you added aerobics, so therefore this is still 14. Cardio was between bodybuilding and dancing, so just double check that all your workshops still contain the correct numbers and that they still match with the workshop. Press pause and try it yourself. We need to know which row we need to delete. So I'm using iCancel and getting input from the user, same as before, using item index +1 so that it can match my 2D array as well as array workshops. Remember, you have the parallel array workshop, so that would be deleted as well from the one-dimensional array. Whether we are deleting from a 1 or 2-dimensional array, our for loop will start at the position that we want to delete. So if they selected the third option, that would be item index 2 +1, I am starting at row 3. Then I'm going to loop all the way to the number of workshops. Remember the -1 so that we can prevent any access violations. The first line here, in between the begin and end, is just removing the workshop from the one-dimensional array. So I am replacing, let's say we wanted to delete number 3, I'm replacing 3 with the one stored in position 4. Still on the inside of the row loop, I now loop through the columns. You will see that the column stays the same, but I am replacing row 3 with the values in row 4, keeping my columns the same. Important that outside of this for loop, that you deduct 1 from your number of workshops variable, because you no longer have 6 workshops. If you click on this button once, you now have 5. And now my display procedure will still work because I have made use of the number of workshops variable to display. Thank you for watching grade 12s, and I hope your program works and that you have some practice for your final exams. Make sure to download more past papers and do those final questions to see the more difficult questions. Please leave some comments if anything is unclear or if there's something else you would like to learn, and I hope to see you soon.